Hello, friends. Welcome back to Hello Friends, episode 42, guys. We are on season 4, episode 11. So there were only 2 more episodes after this, guys. We are on the final disc of season 4. So really exciting stuff. And man, season 4 is it's another breed. It's so good. If you haven't seen the show before, guys, welcome to Project Pod or welcome to Hello Friends. This is the Mr. Robot review show. My name is Kyle, your host. What we do is recap of every episode of Mr. Robot. We're towards the end here, as I mentioned before. So we do a recap of the episode. We do a score out of 10 and a White Rose Award, which goes to the best actor or actress for the episode. And I've been kind of cheating lately and given some dual white roses because the performances have just been so good lately. So we'll see if that happens again this episode or if we do a single white rose. To be honest, I haven't really decided, so we'll find out in about 30 minutes or so. But yeah, welcome to the show, guys. Like I said, man, season 4, dude, just so good. This episode I had chills multiple times watching it, and it's just such a strong finish to such a great season. So that being said, we're gonna kick it off here, guys, with The Plot Is an Illusion. If you guys remember, now that we've kind of wrapped up the Darlene and Dom stuff, which was great, we're back to Elliot, we're back to Mr. Robot, and more importantly, we're back to White Rose. And if you guys remember a couple episodes ago, I think it was right after the transfer where Philip Price died, sadly, R.I.P. White Rose went back to like her dressing room and was getting ready, and we heard gunfire and the doors were locked and the episode cut. This picks up right where that left off there, and White Rose is sitting there getting ready, and one of the henchmen opens the door. The Dark Army agent, White Rose, walks out. We get this incredible shot where it's like this wide angle where White Rose is going down with about 4 bodyguards, and there are just bodies everywhere, dude. Like, absolutely. I think this is the FBI who showed up. They just got absolutely wrecked by Dark Army. There's like blood splatter everywhere. There's a bunch of bodies laying down. It's really, really cool. There's one guy who's like wheezing. He's like barely hanging on to life. White Rose comes over, bends down. You were looking for Minister Zhang. He's not here. He's dead. There's only White Rose now. The guy got shot, and White Rose walks out like an absolute badass, dude. And I'm like, let's go. This obviously confirms what I said earlier, or a couple episodes ago, where it's like, as soon as Elliot and Darlene pulled off that hack against Minister Zhang, we saw Mr. Zhang lose his mind, take one of the guns, and shoot Philip Price, and then they have to like wrestle him into the car. I said at the time that was like the effective death of Minister Zhang because his dream is dead, as Philip Price said. And so now there's only White Rose. So we get more into that in just a bit, but we do cut to Elliot and Darlene, and this is sort of a rewind or a small flashback where they go back to the hug that Darlene and Elliot shared, and they replay this sequence, which is kind of weird because they say like, I've never been on a road trip, me neither, what should I get? And Elliot says, I recommend getting Sour Patch Kids. But then there's a really sweet moment where a line that we didn't get originally, which I don't really know why they didn't just include it in the original episode, but we do, I guess, kind of go back here. Then Sam puts in this line where Elliot says, he's hugging Darlene and he says, thank you for never giving up on me. And I started tearing up, dude. It's so sweet. And Darlene has like a moment where she like can't believe he says that, and she hugs him a little bit harder. And it's really nice. Then we get the shot of Dom, and then he's like, wow, we really pulled this off, didn't we? Darlene puts on her sunglasses and she's like, fuck yeah, we did. And then she's walking away and she sees Mr. Robot chilling by the car, and she looks at him and she says, you really kind of grew on me after you stopped being such a dickhead. And Mr. Robot just kind of like laughs and looks at her. So that's a nice little moment there. And then Darlene gets in the car. We know what happens the rest of the way. So Mr. Robot goes up to Elliot. He tells him like, hey, there's one more thing to do. We have to shut down White Rose's machine. And Mr. Robot's like, what are you talking about? He's like, no, we did our plan. He's like, the plan was never the machine. And Elliot says like, White Rose will be alive as long as her machine is alive. And Mr. Robot's like, are you kidding me? He's like, this isn't what it's about. It's like, this is always what it's been about. And Mr. Robot's like, it's going to take you forever to write that malware anyway. And then he just looks at him and he's like, you already wrote it, didn't you? And Elliot's like, it wasn't that hard. I just used like what we did to attack E-Corp. So Elliot's standing there talking to Mr. Robot, and Mr. Robot's trying to convince him, like, no, dude, we can't do this. And Elliot's like, he looks over and he sees young Elliot and his mom. And Elliot says, you should go with them. Mr. Robot's like, don't shut me out now. And he's like, no, I'm not shutting you out. He's like, I just need to do this on my own. But then we cut to the city and Elliot's walking through with this hoodie. And there's some music playing. It's actually the Beach Boys, Heroes and Villains. And Elliot gets on a bus and he starts going over to the Washington Township plant. We get this cool shot on the bus where it's Elliot and he's got his hoodie on and he's just looking out and it's raining. There's no one next to him. So this kind of signifies that it is just Elliot right now. He kind of left Mr. Robot at home, so to speak, or just away for now. So yeah, Elliot walks up, he's in his hood, he's walking through the different shops there. There's a Bank of E Corp. So that's cool. And then he shows up to the Washington Township plant. There's a great shot where Elliot's kind of looking confused at the camera and the cars are driving away. There's a one-way sign he walks by. And then he shows up to the front of the nuclear power plant and it's like abandoned and the door is cracked open and Elliot's confused. He's looking, there's a sign that says this is a nuclear power plant, blah, blah, blah. It says, unauthorized personnel that could use deadly force. So Elliot kind of walks up, he looks in the booth, which is usually like a security guard, and he just like, the door's cracked open, he just kind of hits it open and like the chair's knocked over and everything. There's no blood or no body or anything, but it's really, really cool because we get the shot of the E Corp power plant, Washington Township, and there's like a shot that comes up and it's really cool. And Elliot's walking to the side and it's this really awesome like shot of the power plant and it's like this big open space. And Elliot just walks in and the door's unlocked and he goes in there. We get an awesome shot of the tree falling over. And so I'm pretty sure this is the same spot where Philip Price went to visit Minister Zhang, and Mr. Zhang got pissed when he told him we need to have a Deus group meeting. And he throws the tree over. This is well lit and it looks different, but I'm 99% sure that was what that shot was supposed to signify, is like, hey, this is where that went down. So all the times we saw them like meeting with Minister Zhang, it looked like this secret base, and it's like it was just the Washington Township plant. From what I interpreted, that could be wrong. So, but I'm pretty sure that's why they showed that tree over. And then Elliot walks in. There's no one at the front desk. You see the E Corp power plant signs, but Elliot walks up the stairs there, and again, it's completely deserted. So Elliot's kind of wondering like what's going on. He tries to open a couple doors, they're locked, but he does get through to one. It's like an office building. There's bins knocked over, no one's there. There's a computer still on. Elliot goes in there and he puts the USB flash drive in there and he starts running his exploit and it just says like complete. And he's like, oh, it's like a nice moment. And he's sitting there, but something's wrong because you're like, there's no way he would just walk in there and, shut down the machine and all that. So Elliot starts walking back towards the back and there's one body there with a guy who's been shot in the head. Elliot looks down and he starts freaking out. He hears sirens. He goes over to the window and there's a bunch of cop cars descending upon the location. Then he looks over and it's Dark Army and it's the Burger Man. And the Burger guy has, I think, his only lines of the whole series. He's eating his burger and he's got like Dark Army agents behind him. And he just goes, hey, you're in the wrong place. And it's really nice. And the music's playing. We get a slow-mo shot of Elliot and the Dark Army agents behind him. They're walking down a hallway. And Elliot looks through the different ways. The Burger Man's eating his burger, of course. And there's like this, I think it's still Beach Boys playing, and everyone's dead. Like all the scientists, all the stuff, like they've just been absolutely massacred. Then we cut to the elevator, Burger guy's eating, and it's just like quiet, and then it cuts back. It's a slow-mo. Dude, slow-mo shots will always look so badass, like in any show, especially if it's done well. It's like, it's really awesome. So eventually they bring Elliot to like the small hallway, and they tell him to like go in there. The clock is stuck on a certain number. There's a whole Mr. Robot, I think, thread about that. I didn't look into it, but there's all these like pictures with the like headshots on the wall with like red, black, white. It's like all the faces are cut out. So I don't know what that's supposed to signify there, but Elliot walks in through the door. And then there's like the room where we saw Angela and White Rose in initially, where there was like, I think it was the red room, and there was like the fish tank. It's now upgraded. The logo in the back, which is like I think it's like a different aquarium. It looks exactly like the Super Smash Bros. Logo. So I was like, that's kind of strange, but I don't know if that's supposed to signify anything, but there's like one little fish in there. But the room is just different now. It's like been upgraded or fixed up, and there's two chairs. Elliot walks in and there's no one there. But of course, he doesn't have to wait long because he looks around. There's a computer. There's a book there that is called Resurrection, and that is by Leo Tolstoy. I guess it's probably a famous book that I didn't look up. There's a sign that Elliot looks at, or a poster on the wall. It says, "When a door closes, a window opens," which, yeah, I guess, but also kind of a weird statement. But we know that's like White Rose's thing. And so White Rose walks in, the watch beeps, and man, we just get a sequence for the ages coming up. So White Rose says, like, usually I have someone else do this, but for the introduction, but she's like, since we've already met, she's like, here I am. And she sits down and she's like, take a seat. Now it's like, what am I doing here? He's like, what are you doing? And there's this great sequence. And I didn't write down all the lines, but this is probably the best sequence in Mr. Robot, if not top 3 for sure of the whole series, I think. So just absolutely next level acting from both Rami and BD Wong on this one. There's an incredible sequence of dialogue where White Rose sits down and has a box, and man, BD Wong's performance, as always, just like I said, just next level, otherworldly, if you want to kind of put the pun in there. It's just it's crazy. I'm like speechless because White Rose sits down and, Elliot says, like, you hate people, and starts talking about all this. And White, again, I'm probably going to butcher this, so I'm sorry if you guys haven't seen it. Go obviously watch the scene or the episode. But White Rose is laughing because Elliot says, like, you hate people, and White Rose is like, don't make me laugh, Elliot. And White Rose talks about how, every day we turn on the news and our scientists and our leaders tell us that, we are the problem, and, there's self-hate is not, it's like no longer an anomaly, it's a given or something. I'm butchering the lines, but it's just incredible because White Rose talks about how she lost everything because, this world is disappointing her. And she's like, I lost the love of my life. I lost the world that I deserved. And she's like, don't you think that we can be in a better world? And this is White Rose's machine, which White Rose has been obsessed with, and talking about parallel universes and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's just, I wish that I probably should have written it down word for word because it's so good, but it's just incredible. And BD Wong's acting is amazing. So it's like unhinged, but also so passionate. And so she's like, Ellie, don't talk to me about hate. Like, because she's like, all I'm trying to do is make this a better world. She's like, Ellie, do I need to remind you what your group's name is? And it's F Society, of course. And he's like, yeah. He's like, you know what? I do hate people. And Elliot's like, he's like, but that's okay because, every now and then he's like, there are some good ones out there. And he's like, even if you hate them, he's like, they love you. He's like, in spite of your hate. And he's like, those are the good ones because he's like, yeah, this world has hurt me. And he's like, yeah, people have done the worst things to me. And obviously he's talking about his dad molesting him, which we now know. And he's like, but you know what? He's like, they love me in spite of that. He's like, I can't feel, they love me for what I can't feel. Or he says like, I can't feel that they love me, but I know they do or something. Again, sorry, I'm completely butchering it, but it's really sweet. And it's just, it's a sequence, guys. It really is. Hopefully if you're watching this review show, you've seen all the episodes by now, or you're watching as we go, but go YouTube it, dude. White Rose Elliot scene. It's another level of acting. I can't even describe it. And I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but we stop talking and then the sirens start going off. The room starts blinking, and it's like the nuclear power plant noises, like the siren noises, like an emergency. I thought immediately of Chernobyl. And so Elliot's like, what's going on? And she's like, Elliot, she's like, my machine, we've had limited testing here. And Elliot's like, no, I shut down your machine. He's like, I ran the exploit. I put in the malware. And she's like, yeah, we know. That's how we found you. But she's like, what you didn't think about is that my machine was already running when you put in the malware, so it didn't do anything. And he's like, your machine can't work here. She's like, yeah, I know. She's like, that's why we were going to move to the Congo. But she's like, we had limited testing here. But she's like, I know, we can still do it. And he's like, if it doesn't work, it's going to be a meltdown. He's like, you'll kill thousands of people. And she's just talking about like, a better world, blah, blah, blah. White Rose opens the box and there's a gun. And then she says, you know, Elliot, you have a choice today. And turns the gun on herself, shoots herself in the head. And it's like, wow. And dude, this is where I was like, this fucking show, man. Like, I cannot believe how good this show is. So White Rose is on there, blood splattered on the white carpet, of course, which is just, it's crazy. And again, before we go any farther, guys, I just want to say thank you to BD Wong for just a performance for the ages. Just absolutely incredible. I really loved every second of all of BD's scenes, and playing a complex character such as White Rose and Mr. Zhang, and being so different with those two, but just wearing your heart in your sleeve for every line, and it goes out with a bang. No pun intended there, but just incredible and an unforgettable performance, an unforgettable character in an unforgettable series, really. So, Mr. Robot then shows up as soon as White Rose is dead, and so White Rose, sorry, I don't want to forget this part too. White Rose does say, like, you know, all those lives that have been lost, they're not going to be in vain, because she's like, we're going to be in a better world. And so she really does believe in this resurrection, which is part of the reason I think she kills herself, because she's like, even if I kill myself here, I'm going to be reborn and like resurrected in another universe. So she's like, all these people that are dead now, not going to be dead. So remind me of the cyber attacks, the bombings, the E-Corp bombings. She doesn't think any of, like Angela was saying, like, see, those people are going to be okay. You know, Elliot does say, like, you know, you're not going to brainwash me like you brainwashed Angela. And she's like, this was never about brainwashing. She's like, this was about helping you come to an understanding. So that is like a big picture thing that we will talk about in the finale. Elliot finds a code, and he's like, okay, 0509. And Mr. Robot's like, we got to get the fuck out of here. And the room is shaking, and you know, they're like, there's going to be a nuclear power plant explosion. And Elliot's like, but we have to stop it. And he's like, it's going to kill so many people. And he's like, it's going to blow up. And Mr. Robot's like, I know, that's why we need to get the fuck out of here. But Elliot's like playing hero again. And he's like, no, I need to stop this thing. He finds an envelope within the resurrection book, and it says exit. And he's like, oh, she said I have a choice. And he's like, this is my choice. And he puts in a little floppy disk or whatever, and it runs up the old like Apple thing, and they play a game called Exit. And it's like, once again, a choose your adventure game, sort of, where it starts off and it basically gives you like a scenario, and you have to type in the prompts there. It's like really old, like first computer game things, which I always found are pretty cool, because there's like certain prompts you have to put in there. But the first one, it shows like a dungeon with a barrel, and it says you're trapped in a dungeon with your friend. You see a barrel. What do you do? And Elliot looks at it, and it's cool because it like zooms in on the question every time, like important words on it. And Elliot says, move the barrel. And so it says the barrel rolls aside, and you find a secret tunnel. What do you do? And you know, all this time the sirens are going off, and Mr. Robot's like, dude, we got to get out of here. And Elliot just keeps playing, and he says, enter the tunnel. And it says you start to escape, but your friend is too weak to go on. They hand you a note. What do you do? And it's just the way this is worded. It's so like intense and cool, and it's like eerie. So it zooms in. It says they hand you a note. Obviously, Elliot just got a note. He says, read note. It says it is too dark to read the note. What do you do? And then the camera shakes again, and the plant is going to explode. And Mr. Robot's like, Elliot, we have to get the fuck out of here right now. Elliot's just like, no. He understands that like he's like, this game is going to be a way to shut down the machine. And so he types in leave, and it says you crawl through the tunnel, and the tunnel leads you to a beach. What do you do? And you know, Elliot's looking at it, and he says, look. And it says in the water you see a boat. What do you do? And the camera shakes again, and Mr. Robot's like, dude, I'm not going to tell you again. We got to get out of here. And Elliot says, get on the boat. And then it says, congratulations, you're headed to a new world. Do you want to play again? But the sirens are still going off. And Elliot's like, it didn't work. He's like, I'm missing something. And Mr. Robot is like, bro, I'm not going to do this anymore. And Elliot's like, it says, do you want to play again? And he says, yes. And it's cool because he's like, I'm missing something. And so he goes through the prompts again. And then on the first question where it says, you know, you're trapped in a dungeon with your friend, you see a barrel, what do you do? It zooms in on your friend, so great camera work there. And Elliot says, sit down next to my friend. And so it says your friend hands you a note, what do you do? And so now they're getting different prompts, which is really, really cool. So it's like, even though the obvious answers got out, that wasn't the correct way to go. So it says your friend hands you a note, what do you do? He says, light a match. And it says, the note says, don't leave me here, which is super sad. Do you leave your friend or stay? And then it zooms in again. And he thinks about it. And it's like, we all know the answer, right? We all know it's stay. But this is like where Elliot gets to make a choice where, is he going to be selfish or is he going to stay there? And he talked about how the people that love him no matter what, even if he hates people. We've seen Elliot's past episodes where he's talking to Krista and he says, fuck society. And this is where he has a chance to do good. And it says, do you leave your friend or stay? And it zooms in and Elliot takes a minute and he types stay. And this was a really cool, like, subtle moment because he types stay and he hits enter. And then the game like shuts down and the lights go off and it's like, oh, and Mr. Robot's like, did we do it? And it looks like they shut it down for a second. There's another shake there. Mr. Robot, the sirens are going more, but Mr. Robot opens the door. There's like smoke pouring through. We're assuming that way is like blocked off. And Mr. Robot and Elliot look at each other. They know they're trapped in there. And Mr. Robot turns and he goes, it's too late. And so Elliot sits down. White Rose's body, of course, is in the front. So it's really, really cool. And Mr. Robot sits down and they both kind of know that they're done for. And it's so sweet because Elliot looks at Mr. Robot and he just says, I love you. And this is crazy because Elliot has never said that to anyone, let alone Mr. Robot. And everything that he's gone on with his dad, finding out about him molesting him and everything like that, and how he shuts off Mr. Robot, and Mr. Robot was protecting him, but Elliot forgave him, and everything that's been going on. It's so sweet that he says, I love you. And Mr. Robot, and there's a tear that goes down his face. Mr. Robot says, I love you too. Then I thought he was going to say kiddo, but he didn't say kiddo. But it's such a great moment. And it kind of slowly pans out there and the room turns red and the whole screen goes red. And then we cut to a cell phone that says, like, this is your wake up call. It's the alarm that goes off. And there's a hand that touches it. It's Elliot's hand. And this is Elliot's apartment, but it's like an apartment we've never seen before. The sun is shining in. Elliot's just chilling in his boxers. And he's got a record player on the right-hand side. He puts it on, and it's the song "Turn Up the Radio." Yeah, Elliot's apartment it's nice. It's the same apartment that we've seen, but there's light filling it. And it's a little bit different. I think it's nicer than what we've seen Elliot have, and it's super nice. There's a nice TV. There's like some wood structures. It's really, really like a nice apartment. Elliot stretches and, he's got like a headache, but he's looking around and the light coming in is just beautiful. It's really great. And Elliot, there's like a montage where it's like happy music and, he shaves and he gets ready, he takes a shower and he looks happy and he gets dressed up and he's looking nice. And it's like, oh, this is the different Elliot. We haven't seen this Elliot before. There is an earthquake and it shakes. So that something is amiss. And so Elliot's like, oh, that's weird. And Angela calls him and he's like, oh my God. And it's a really cool moment. He picks up the FaceTime video and he's looking at her and it's really, really great subtle acting by Rami. And she's like, hey, and she's like getting ready. And she's like, are you okay? She's like, you seem a little off. And he's like, no, he's like, I'm good. And she's like, oh, I miss you. And blah, blah, blah. They have this sequence. And she's like, I see you haven't started packing it all. And Elliot looks over and there's a self-storage box there. And so we'll get more into that. I don't want to spoil anything if anyone hasn't seen the last 2 episodes. But, he's like, I did get tape. And she's like, that's not nothing. And it's really sweet because they have like this cute back and forth. And this is obviously the happiest we've seen Elliot and Angela. And Angela says, like, I can't wait to marry you tomorrow. And we're like, whoa. So obviously Elliot and Angela, we don't know. They've always had like hints at romantic implications with like Hooded Elliot that we've seen. But this is straight up like they're in a relationship and they're going to get married tomorrow, which is crazy. So this is obviously a different version of Elliot. His dad's cell phone, his dad doesn't pick up his cell phone. And we're like, uh-oh. But then he calls the shop. And it is the Mr. Robot repair shop, but it's got like the Geek Squad logo. And so it's a little bit different. And we see Christian Slater like working on like a repair like some chips in the background. And he's like, Mr. Robot repair shop. He's like, computer repair with a smile. And he's like, oh, hey son. And he's super nice. And he's like, Dad, he's like, I think Angela knows. He's like, there's no way that Angela knows. He's like, that's impossible. And it's like this happy-go-lucky, again, the sun is shining in, and it's similar to what we've seen, but it's so different in the world we know, which is crazy. And again, at this point, we're thinking, did White Rose's machine work? Is this an alternate universe? What's going on? Is everything we've seen like been a dream? It's all crazy. But there's like a customer going and he's like, okay, Elliot, he's like, I gotta go. He's like, he eventually goes out there and Mr. Robot opens the door and he's like, oh, I guess they walked off. And his phone is on the ground there because he's like, I'm always losing that thing. And he gets a missed call from Elliot. And that's when he sees like the background picture and it's Elliot's mom and young Elliot and him at the beach. And it's a missed call from Elliot, which is important. So we'll get into that again, probably during the finale. I don't want to spoil anything. But Elliot goes to work at Allsafe, and it's really similar, but the logo's a little bit different. And on the news, it says like, you know, earthquake reported in New York City. So obviously that like never happens in New York City, which is cool. But Elliot goes over and he sees, it's the guy from like Allsafe that he's working with at the beginning, and he says like, hey man, he's like, I need you to make sure that all that stuff is ready for E-Corp. And he's like, E-Corp? He's like, what, did you just say E-Corp? He's like, you mean F-Corp? And he's like, yeah, of course I meant that. And he's like, are you nervous? He's like, dude, he's like, that's not like you. He's like, you're usually stone cold. And he's like, oh yeah. And then we get Ollie, and played by Ben Rappaport. And it's like, man, it was fun to see him like come back in there. And it's funny because like this is obviously like an alternate universe or an alternate world, but he's still just like a douchebag. And he's like, oh, BMOC. He's like, what's up, man? And he's like, BMOC? And he's like, big man on campus. And he's like, that's not a thing. And they're like, that's definitely not a thing. He's like, a stupid thing, maybe. He's like, hey, he's like, I just want to let you know. He's like, you know, you're going to crush this. He's like, I can be a big time asset. And it's just like, okay, Ollie. And then he's like, hey, I meet a new lady tonight. He's like, Stella B. And I was like, oh, and I think that's the girl that he cheated on Angela with in our universe. So that's a funny little thing. And Elliot's just kind of looking at him. And there's a commercial for F-Corp. And it's like, this is you know, making a better society. And then we get another like news clip where it's Xi Zhang, which is like obviously Minister Zhang, but it's Zhang is a woman. So this is like White Rose, but just Mr. Zhang. It's obviously alternate universe, but it talks about how, you know, like White Rose it's the White Rose Foundation. It's called Deus Giving, and there's a new charity, legendary nonprofit status. It's really like White Rose is this incredible person, and White Rose talked about before killing herself in the universe that, you know, she's like, all she wanted to do is help people, and it's like this is the world that we're seeing. Like we're seeing like a better world, and so this was like White Rose's vision. He goes to his office. He's the chief executive officer at Allsafe, and so they're like, hey, there's a big meeting there, and we get to the boardroom, and Elliot's putting together a presentation, and we get my boy Tyrell Wellick, dude. And this is so cool because he's facing the window and he says, can Elliot and I have the room, please? And they all leave. Tyrell Wellick, who has always worn a suit, who has always cared about how he looks in our world that we know. This is so cool because they switch roles here. And Elliot is kind of buttoned up, and Tyrell Wellick is wearing a hoodie, and it's not a black hoodie, but he's wearing like an unbuttoned shirt. He hasn't shaved, dude. He's similar to me. He's like scruffy, and he's got glasses on, and he's wearing a hoodie. And this is so cool because he looks kind of concerned. Tyrell, we know, has always been so confident, at least in the early seasons. And it's so cool because I just think about back to that wood scene where it's him and Mr. Robot and Elliot walking through. And he's like, you know what, Elliot? He's like, you succeed because he's like, you don't care. He's like, you never have cared. He's like, I spent all this money on the suit. And he's like, you wear the same hoodie every day. And he's like, that's why you succeed. And he's like, I care about what other people think of me. And so this is an alternate version of Tyrell. And it's so cool because Elliot is the one who cares. And we get like a bit of Elliot that we know and also a bit of this new Elliot. So it's really, really cool. And Tyrell asks him, Elliot, tell me what the worst thing in your life is. And he's like, I don't know if this is going to work out for us. And he's like, well, honestly, if you're passing on us, he's like, I would say it's this meeting right here. He's like, no, seriously. He's like, what is the worst thing in your life? And he's like, well, the worst thing is also the best thing. He's like, I'm stuck in this boring, repetitive loop. And I'm like, oh, big thing for the finale. So again, not going to spoil anything. We'll talk about it in the finale. But he's like, you know, every day I wake up, I put on my record, I come here. He's like, you know, I have this great relationship. He's like, it's the same thing every day, but he's like, I know that I'm lucky to be where I am. And Tyrell sits down and he looks kind of nervous. And it's so obvious that Tyrell is looking for something more. And at some point, I think it's in this conversation where Elliot says, this is cool because Elliot like has knowledge of like the Elliot that we know and also this new Elliot. And so he tells him, like, look, Tyrell, he's like, I've had the same thoughts that you're having. He's like, a more exciting life. He's like a more interesting person, a risk taker. Tyrell's like, you have? And he's like, yeah. He's like, it's not always better or whatever. I'm again kind of paraphrasing there, but basically that's what like hooks Tyrell, and they end up working with all F Corp. And so then we cut to the bar, and or like a restaurant. It's Mr. Robot, who's looking a little bit older, but he's cheersing with Elliot. They got beers, and he's like, kiddo, you just landed the biggest fish that there is to get. He's like, F Corp. He's like, go ahead and celebrate. And Elliot goes, did you bring it? And he goes, did I bring it? And he pulls out like this binder, whatever, and Elliot looks through it, and it is from the mixed up files of Mrs. Basil E. Frank Wheeler, which I guess is like some sort of famous book that I don't know about, but that was kind of a cool moment. And Elliot's like, I need to make sure Angela's home, when I drop her off or whatever. And he's like, let me call. And she's like, I wonder if her mom is there. And he calls, and he's like, hey, Emily. And he's like, Emily must be Angela's mom. And if we remember, guys, Emily was killed in the Washington Township plant. So this is really cool. He calls Emily, and he's like, that's weird. And he's like, she picked up and then hung up. And so I'm like, oh, so if this is an alternate universe, or if White Rose's machine did work, maybe there are some ramifications where Elliot said, when he's talking to White Rose, like, your machine can't work here. And White Rose said we had limited proximity for testing. So she's like not entirely sure that it can't work. So maybe it did work, but they were just like, not everything works. So like things like Angela's mom being back, maybe that's not the case. But, he does talk to Angela later and says like, are your parents around or whatever? And she's like, oh, they were just doing so. I don't know what was going on with the phone call, but Elliot, when he's talking to his dad across the table, he does say like, oh, I forgot my wallet at home. And Mr. Robot looks at him and he goes, that's not like you. He's like, that's okay, kiddo. He's like, he gives him the money. He's like, go get her some flowers. And he's like, get her something nice. And there's no like F coin card. I thought they were going to use like F coin or F money or whatever. But he just hands him cash. And Elliot goes and gets flowers, and he calls Angela, and he shows up at the apartment. And I think this is Dom's apartment, just like repurposed, but it's like Angela's place, of course. And it's a little bit different, and there's always light. Elliot takes the wrapping off the flowers, and he goes to throw it away, and there's a broken glass in the trash with like bloody like napkins or whatever. And I don't remember what this is from. I know it's important, but I saw this and I was like, I don't remember quite what that is. He's like, wow, your dad loves drinking, huh? And she's like, what? And he's like, oh, never mind. And I'm like, well, that's kind of weird that you would say that anyway. But, he covers it over, but Elliot knows something is up, and it's like past Elliot's memories with current Elliot or alternate Elliot. So that's interesting. But he's like, oh, what's tomorrow? And they have like this cute little thing where he's like, she's like, well, there is a new Pilates thing going on tomorrow. He's like, I don't really like Pilates. And she's like, well, we're getting married tomorrow. She's like, could that be it? And he's like, could be. It's just a really, really nice moment. It's like Angela and Elliot like being cute and being happy. And it's obviously, we've never seen Elliot like truly happy. So he gets in the taxi, and he's going to pick up Angela. And the guy goes, hey, the radio, is that okay? And Elliot's like, actually, can you turn it up? And it's the same song he played at the beginning, Turn Up the Radio, which again leads to show you that he's just in this loop, which we'll get more into. But, it's a nice like sounding song. He turns it up, and Elliot's looking out the window, and he's smiling, and he's like really happy. He gets back to his apartment, and there's a Matt that says, hello, I'm Matt, which is funny. And Elliot gets in his apartment, he flicks the lights on, and he looks, and he's like shocked. And then we get Hacker Elliot, or our Elliot that we know, sitting at his computer. It's like nighttime, so the light's shining in, but it's like a dark light. And Elliot, dressed up Elliot, is looking at him, and he says, who are you? And he looks over at Hacker Elliot, and he's like shocked. He looks at him, and then the music cuts, and it's like, what a way to end it, dude. I remember watching this live and being like, oh my God, what, like Elliot and Elliot are meeting, and it's like, what is going to happen here? And it's like the alternate universe stuff, the multiverse. I'm a sucker for all that stuff, especially like anything involving it. So yeah, there's so many questions that we have. Did White Rose's machine work? Are there ramifications? We've heard all series long that Philip Price is telling White Rose, like, you're just a con artist. It's like, I almost believed you when you told Angela, like, we can live in a better world. And we always thought White Rose's machine was like mysterious. I got like Lost vibes in this episode, where it's like there's like a bigger picture and something mysterious. But we always thought it was bullshit. Everyone was like, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. And now we're like, this is kind of the bigger mystery of the show, and there's so many theories about it. But it's like, did White Rose's machine work? We'll find out. I think to some extent, although I'm still not entirely sure, and I don't know if I'll be sure after finishing this rewatch. But it's just really cool. It's just so cool, and like everything that's happening, where it's part of Elliot has the memories and all the events that have happened. And then this part of Elliot that has seemingly been like living as this happy life and being with Angela, like those are kind of mixed, and it's like they're molding together, and it's really awesome. But I cannot wait for next episode where it's Elliot versus Elliot. And I just remember that sequence where they're talking to each other being crazy good. But yeah, that's how this episode ends. For a White Rose for this one, it's tough to choose. It really is. It's just across the board in this episode, we get very little of Darlene, and obviously there's like a really quick shot of Dom. But the episode really focuses on Elliot and White Rose, and that scene where they are talking to each other, and like BD Wong gives this incredible speech, and then Elliot fights right back with it, and kind of proves White Rose that she's wrong in a sense, where it's like, yeah, this world sucks and this world lets you down, and yeah, there are bad people and you're gonna get hurt and all that stuff, but he's like, there are also good people, and he's like, people love me even if I can't love myself. And it's just like, it's so good. I've been giving out a lot of dual White Roses this season 4, because season 4 is focused a lot on like duality, where it's like not only obviously in this case where it's like potential multiverse with White Rose believing that there's a parallel universe and there's multiple existences and all that stuff. But the episodes have kind of been like, this episode is Dom and Darlene's episode, and this episode is Mr. Robot and Elliot. And obviously like duality is kind of a theme throughout the show, where it's like one character linked to another, and even between like Elliot and Tyrell and so many things. But season 4 specifically has been like, this is this person's episode for the most part. Not every episode has been like that, but so I want to say Elliot and BD Wong, or I should say Rami and BD Wong, get the double White Rose here. But because it is the final episode for Minister Zhang, or I shouldn't say Mr. Zhang, the final episode for White Rose, and I'm just so like in love with his performance throughout the series, I have to give the final White Rose of BD Wong's appearance in the show to BD Wong for playing White Rose, only White Rose in this episode, but just as a whole, playing Minister Zhang and White Rose. And like I said earlier, such a complex character, because really it's two characters played by the same actor, two different identities, obviously, and two completely different personalities, where it's like one is so strict on, well, they're both really strict on time, of course, but one is like, the diplomat, and then one is just like the terrorist, kind of the terrorist, but also, White Rose had good intentions, just not the execution. But we've seen the extreme amount of pain and loss that White Rose has gone through, and the reasons behind her actions, where she is petty sometimes, and like the cyber bombings didn't have to happen, but just because Philip Price was like challenging her, she kind of went after it. But we also find out, like she said, this world has hurt her more than she can say, lost the love of her life, didn't like the world. She had to go to White Rose because like the world, I think China's where they're from. If I'm not correct, and I don't mean to offend anyone, but that world doesn't accept homosexuality. So the world that White Rose deserved, or Mr. Zhang deserved, was not possible in their homeland. So that's why she's so upset, and that's why she's so angry at the world. But she wants to build a different world and a better world, because this one doesn't accept her for who she truly is. And so that's all crazy. And BD Wong, it's so heartbreaking and sad, but really believing in like resurrection, and like she says, all of those lives lost are not going to be in vain, because once the machine works, she thinks that like they're just going to go to another universe. But does that mean that this happened in this universe? Or it's all crazy, confusing multiverse stuff. I love that kind of stuff, even if I don't completely understand it. But yeah, BD Wong, thank you so much for just an incredible character. And you get the White Rose for the final time as White Rose in the show. Okay, guys, the score. Again, I've been giving out 10s left and right, but man, I had chills, full body chills for so much this episode. I cried. I laughed a little bit at a couple scenes. It was, it's just, I couldn't believe how good the show is. It's a 10 out of 10. Once again, it's like, I've been giving out a lot of 10s, but season 4 is so damn good. And it's like everything that we've been building up towards. It's been such a strong show throughout, but I mean, season 4 is just paying off, where it's like, last episode we had like Darlene and Dom like executing the hack. Well, not Dom, but she was there for that. But Darlene really executing the transfer and like seeing that payoff that we've been building up for. You know, we've obviously recently got Elliot's pain that he went through, but then like showing that Mr. Robot is there to care for him and that whole stuff. And then this episode we got White Rose's ultimate demise, which was built on a lot of unfortunate like self-hate, and Elliot saying like, hey, I know where you're coming from, but also there are good people out there and they love you in spite of you hating yourself, and just so much good stuff. And cinematography, the score, but just like the overall storytelling is just a masterclass. And I want to thank Sam Esmail for just an incredible show. And yeah, just an awesome episode. Like the eerie parts where Elliot's going to the power plant, it's deserted, and we know why it's deserted, because everyone was taken out, and Dark Army kind of, even though all their money is gone, which to me I thought, okay, so there's no money left for Dark Army, so how loyal are the henchmen going to be for White Rose? And you'd think that these people would probably be like, oh, you're not paying me, I'm not going to work for you anymore. There'd be like a mutiny, but it's like Dark Army is so loyal to White Rose, and they believe so much in her dream, that not only have we seen throughout the episodes that they turn the gun on themselves and kill them before they can reveal information, but even when White Rose has nothing, even when the money is gone, whether they know that or not, I'm sure they do, they still will follow White Rose to the end there. And so it's just crazy. And yeah, just a masterpiece of an episode. Okay, guys, that's it. That is another episode down. So we have 2 left, and I think the last 2 are a 2-parter, but I think they're both like 50 minutes plus. So I'm going to split it up into 2. So we have 2 final episodes left, guys. We got a glimpse into another world here. What to make of it? Is it real? Is it fake? Has it been in our head? Is it all that stuff? But I love that kind of stuff. That's why I love things like Lost, even though I know everyone's like, oh, it's just a dream or whatever. It's like, you know what, dude, interpret it how you want. That's what makes the show so great too, is that it's not black or white. There are some things that are left up to the imagination, left up to interpretation, and that's what I love so much about this show as well. It's so fun to see the different fan theories and all that stuff, and I have a lot to process, and going into the final episode, and I'm sure after the final episode I'm still gonna have all these things and think differently than I did. There's things I picked up on watching this episode that I never picked up on the first time. And part of that is probably because there were like years between episodes, so it wasn't as fresh in my mind. But like things like the Christmas tree being thrown over when Elliot walks in, I was like, oh, that's where this was taking place, at the power plant. And Philip Price obviously knew that was happening. Every time he went to go see BD Wong, it was at the power plant, and this whole secret machine that nobody really knew about, it was hidden in the power plant. It's really, really cool. We saw a really brief glimpse of the machine, I think, like way back in like maybe season 2 or something, where it was like a panning out shot. But White Rose's machine as a whole is pretty mysterious. And I also love the fact that Elliot tried to like write the malware, and then she's like, no, my machine was already running. And so I don't think the malware had an effect on that, but also maybe it did, because Elliot's obviously crazy smart, and usually when Dark Army thinks that they're ahead of Elliot, he's actually like, no, actually I already thought about that and I made another step. But yeah, just an incredible show, guys. I really do think it's the best show in the history of television, and rewatching this and reviewing this has really just solidified that for me. And please, if you haven't seen Mr. Robot, I don't know why you would be watching this video, but please go tell your friends to watch it, like I've been doing. I've been like begging my friends to watch Mr. Robot. I really think it's the best show of all time. And just from the acting, the score, the cinematography, it's just different and crazy and amazing. And, you know, it's got a story from start to finish. And I could talk about it all day, honestly. So this video is probably going to be a little long in the tooth, but yeah, just an amazing episode, amazing series, guys. Thanks for checking out Project Potter. Thanks for checking out Hello Friends. Like, comment, subscribe. Go check out the other content on the channel. We got a whole bunch of stuff coming. Yeah, until next time, guys. Goodbye, friend.